So, Bull Moose, you're working on a video about the Qatari Blockade. Um, what's up, Bull Moose? Have yourself a good night, man. Or thanks for coming in. Enjoy the shit.
Greetings. Today we'll be discussing the blockade on the Arabian nation of Qatar. Qatar being the Islamic nation that ranks number 5 in the estimated population percentage of slaves. To begin, let's cover some background on why this blockade exists in the first place. Reports emerged in late May 2017 of a speech given by the Qatari emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, where he was purported to have criticized America, offered support for Iran, reaffirmed Qatar's support for Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, and said that Qatar's relations with Israel were quote-unquote good. Qatar's official news agency then also reported that Qatar was withdrawing its ambassadors from Saudi, Bahrain, Egypt, and the UAE after discovering a conspiracy against Qatar. Subsequently, Qatari officials furiously denied that there was any truth behind these words, but the damage was done. The Qatari emir, the emir being the monarch and head of state, reaffirmed support for Hamas, who, if you don't know, is a self-described Sunni Islamist movement, which is designated as a terrorist organization by the Bahraini, Egyptian, Russian, Syrian, Saudi, and UAE governments. But not only that, the emir offered support for Iran, which, if you know anything about Middle Eastern affairs, you will know that the Saudis hate Iran, primarily due to the Sunni Shia sectarianism within Islam. Qatar has long had a tense relationship with the U.S. On a military-to-military level, the two countries cooperate well generally, but the U.S. has long been angered by what it seems as slanted coverage in the Middle East by Qatar-owned Al Jazeera, Qatar's apparent support for a range of Islamist groups around the region, and lax anti-terrorist financing laws. Similarly, Qatar has been bold in its support for Hamas, the Palestinian militant group affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood. In May 2017, Qatar used its influence to push Hamas to issue a policy document seen by some as an attempt to soften its extremist image. Well, I suppose I would blockade Qatar too if I knew they were supporting my direct enemies. However, that's not enough for our Secretary of State. Mr. Tillerson said the blockade was having humanitarian consequences. But while praising Qatar's emir for working to limit the funding of terror groups, Mr. Tillerson said more needed to be done. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has accused Qatar of funding terrorism and urged it to stop. Quote, I decided with Rex Tillerson that the time had come to call on Qatar to end funding an extremist ideology in terms of funding. End quote. Quote, stop teaching people to kill other people. We want you back among the unity of nations. End quote. The Qataris deny accusations that they support Islamist extremists. May I point you to the week prior where you reaffirm support for Hamas? Why is it that everybody in the White House violently disagrees on everything? This just aggravates me too much. None of them can get their heads out of their asses over there. Why? Just why? Why can't you get together and just toe the same line in the same direction? Well, enough of that. Let's see how Qatar is responding to this, and what better way to accomplish that than observe their state news outlet, Al Jazeera. The human cost of the ongoing blockade of Qatar by 3 of its Arab Gulf neighbors is mounting on a daily basis, according to Qatar's National Human Rights Committee. Well, I'm not about to take the word of a human rights committee operated by the government ranking number 5 in estimated percentage of slaves. As part of the measures against Doha, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt severed diplomatic and transport ties with Qatar and expelled Qatari expatriates. Saudi Arabia also closed Qatar's only land border. Many citizens affected by the ongoing rift have since filed complaints with the NHRC. I don't really care about some Hamas-supporting shitstain who can't go home to Hamas-supporting Doha to see his Hamas-supporting parents for vacation from his job in Hamas. Why don't you confront the real human rights issue in your country? The estimated 30,300 people enslaved within your borders. But of course you won't. Instead, you're going to waste my time with this. A human rights body in Qatar says it has monitored several serious violations against Qatari students in 3 neighboring countries and a major regional fallout, according to a report on state media. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain cut diplomatic ties with Qatar and imposed a blockade against it on June 5th over allegations that it funds terrorism. The 3 Arab Gulf countries, along with Egypt, who have severed relations, have not provided any evidence for their claims, while Qatar repeatedly denied the allegations as quote-unquote baseless. Their allegations aren't baseless. A little hypocritical, but not baseless. But go on. Tell me how these students have it so bad, while Qatari slaves are living lavishly. Qatar's National Human Rights Committee, the NHRC, which has previously called the moves against Qatar, quote, worse than the Berlin Wall, said that the unjust siege was impacting the right to education for Qatari students in the 3 countries, especially in the UAE. Yes, because some Hamas-supporting degenerate, not being able to return home to Hamas-supporting Doha to see his Hamas-supporting family is worse than the Berlin Wall, a structure which killed nearly 80 people who were in pursuit of freedom from communist East Germany, a structure which divided a country for 28 years, whose pieces are seen in museums across the world as a message to never repeat its causes. Yes, your little border struggle and trade problem is worse than the Berlin Wall. It really does sicken me to see a country so lacking in self-awareness to say that because they are being called out for supporting terrorism, they are the victims of worse treatment than East Germans during the Cold War. It makes me even more sick to my stomach when I have to defend Saudi Arabia, who is a direct funder of Islamist mosques in Europe. I certainly do hope that Qatar crumbles as a result of this.